Value Impulses with Dr. Ulrich Vogel. Personnel Diagnostics Insights, Leadership, Assessments, and Personnel Development. A warm welcome to all our listeners to this episode. Today, we're talking about the positioning of consultants and coaches in this highly competitive market. Unlike the episode 1 recorded a few weeks ago, which was about selling coaching services. Now, we're actually, so to speak, before the sale, at the positioning stage. And there's already a lot that can go wrong here. I'm going to address this topic in 4 points. First, why failure is often the order of the day when it comes to positioning in the market. Second, I'll take a look at the topic of transformation. Then, my third point, the topic of expertise. I'll focus a bit on this, and finally, fourth, I'll bring in a few practical aspects. Let me quickly outline what this means here. Let's take a look. What does the market actually look like? For consultants and coaches. I've mentioned this before in another episode. Now I've seen some new estimates again, about 100,000 consultants and 20,000 coaches. Just in Germany alone. Of course, you can be a consultant for all sorts of things, IT, processes, whatever else, but still, the sheer number is enormous. And my goal now is to show you how you can achieve differentiation with tools and expertise. And especially by focusing on your clients' problems and the transformation you can achieve for them. A clear USP, a clear positioning, and solid proof are the keys to a successful presence. And positioning really means building trust and making your unique value visible right from the start, without always having to argue about price. That's an ongoing, annoying problem for consultants and coaches. Namely, when we get involved, why does it so often fail? Yes, that's the time for money trap. That's the natural bottleneck, really, in the coaching business and, unfortunately, and I say that deliberately, most of the time in the consulting business too. My good friend from Switzerland and fellow consultant, Andy, always handled this really well. He really charged properly for projects. And then the client says, yes, but you are. You're twice as expensive as your colleague so-and-so, and so on. And he says, yes, but look, I'm 4 times as good. So, in that sense, it actually puts things into perspective. And if I'm stuck here with fixed hourly or daily rates, then in the end, with extra work, I'm basically my own fool, to put it bluntly. If I've really mastered it and can do things in an incredibly short time, can run analyses, maybe get to the point in coaching much faster than the competition, then I'm actually being silly if I charge by the hour. That's why you should always aim for results. And in the end, the client really doesn't care how we get to the results, who's involved, or how much time it takes. The main thing is that the result is there. And if you're stuck in this time for money trap, then you're also more easily replaceable. So without any differentiation, you're just another provider among many. And as Warren Buffett put it so nicely, the secret to a successful life is weak competition. So full or strong competition. That's for fools, as Rolf Dobelli puts it. In his latest book, which I highly recommend, I read it with great pleasure. The not-to-do list is now on the market and is truly a great read. Packed with all kinds of insights. What do I mean by that? As I mentioned earlier, 100,000 consultants, 20,000 coaches. You have to find a niche. You have to figure out where, within your own circle of competence, you're really, really good. And how to find this niche, you can definitely read about that from management thinkers like Peter Drucker or Roger Martin, for example. And it's once again about positioning. That doesn't mean that the other work you already do for your clients, which might not be in your absolute core competency, that those will disappear. No, you can always take care of side tracks. It's a question of pull or push. So if there's demand from the client, like, yes, please, could you run that great workshop for me again? Of course you can do that, if it's worth your while. But the push, so, how do I go about things proactively? How do I push into the market and push towards potential clients? That's positioning. That's where you're sharp, that's where you're in a niche, that's really where you have your area of expertise, where you've mastered it, that's the right spot. And of course, you have to prove that as well. A consultant who can't provide proof of their success will lose clients to cheaper competitors. And I mean, the difference between a high-priced coach with solid proof and someone who's maybe just selling a feeling. And we don't really like going to miracle healers or anything like that. Instead, we go to the doctor and get the proper tests done. And we don't take our new car to the guy around the corner who tinkers with cars, but to a proper auto repair shop. And we have them run diagnostics. And we go to the optician, and we're glad that there are food inspections. And so on. So diagnostics are simply an important point, and you need to have a toolkit. And that needs to be reflected in your positioning. It should be immediately obvious, yes, So your goal should be to increase both the effectiveness and efficiency, and to raise the perceived value of your work. That's why your positioning in the market, on your website, on LinkedIn, and so on, needs to make this clear right away. Yes, where you are positioned as a specialist and where you are especially strong. And that brings me to the second point, the transformation, so focusing on that. Not just what you can do, but which problem you solve. And of course, you have your area of expertise mastered, right? Yes, but you can't just go around advertising that as the very first thing, like putting a label on yourself or waving a sign in front of you. Instead, you really have to look at the customer's problem. Gain clarity about your customer's problems and, I'd say, also learn the vocabulary your customers use to talk about these problems and describe them. For example, in the market you're working in, where you and we are active. Mishires, for instance, cause costs and frustration within a company. Or dissatisfied or underperforming teams, where performance drops and turnover increases. A cardinal problem. Or another issue, leaders without clear values who fail to create lasting impact. And it's important that, in your positioning, this awareness of the problem comes first and foremost. So that people are drawn in and say, yes, exactly, that's a problem. And then we move into the solution. The solution, which also includes tools, expertise, and the ability to implement. And this is exactly the point where consultants and coaches should equip themselves with the right tools. Diagnostic tools, yes of course, as well as methodology, specific workshop methods, certain training techniques, so that targeted recommendations can be made. Just saying, yes, I do workshops or yes, I do an assessment, that's not enough. These days, that's not the case, people want to know more. And you can also stand out with your expertise, showing that there's something substantial at work. And yes, that this leads to reliable results and not just gut feeling. That's all that counts here. For example, potential analyses, I've already recorded a whole series of episodes about that. Or how teen role models work, or similar topics. It's about doing a systematic assessment at the start of a coaching process, which then allows you to derive appropriate measures that really fit the situation. But now, and this is really important, the tools alone won't solve the problem. It's your ability to use them and put them into practice that makes the difference. That's why I always say, please don't do that. Going in with the tools, with profiling values, so to speak, and putting them on a silver platter, that's counterproductive. Of course, there needs to be a sense of trust between people, between the prospects and yourself. But it also needs to be clear, and you can make this clear, that you work with tools that are scientific, valid, and actually lead to results. Because you have to, after all, for your client, deliver results that they can see right away and actually put into practice. And that's how you reach a higher level, that's why it's called transformation. So, what role does your expertise play in this context? Why do tools actually require time and effort? I mean, sure, you could just go ahead and say, okay, let's do this quickly now. Red, yellow, green, blue, and so on. And that's how you are, and that's how you are. But that's not enough. Not these days. Of course, tools and diagnostics are powerful, but they're only powerful if you really know how to use them. So, if you're going to add something to your toolkit, then you really need to know how to use it, and use it well. And I mean, Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's partner, put it nicely once. He said that in life, we have to be a learning machine. We have to keep learning, constantly expanding and deepening our expertise, because the world keeps moving and otherwise we'll end up stuck in the past. And you're certainly a consultant and a coach. Really strong, experienced, good at what you do, successful, and so on. Still, it's not just harmless, it's actually really great if you expand your expertise even further. And when you're really strong and skilled with a tool, with an instrument, with a method, you're on the right track. And that's an investment. An investment in your competence, when you get certified somewhere, when you train yourself in a certain method, and so on. So, here's the tricky part. It's important to know something competently and in depth. So, differentiation through solid knowledge. And it really does take time and energy to stand out from the crowd. And of course, that has to be communicated credibly in your positioning, on your website, on LinkedIn as well. The message I want to get across to you is, the time you invest in your further education, you'll make that back through better client retention and higher fees, once you've done these things. Clients pay for expertise and for results. And again, not for hours. By the way, that's also part of the time for money trap. That's the fundamental problem that certain professions have. Just look at lawyers, therapists, or your typical consultant. Ultimately, it's an issue with the incentive system, right? If I'm a good lawyer, of course I want my client to win their case. On the other hand, I also want to increase my own income. And that's always a balancing act. The same goes for therapists. If new patients aren't exactly lining up at their door, they might say, well, we'll just have to add another round of sessions. That's how it goes. And it's the same for consultants. That's why it's always better to focus on results, on packages, on assignments. Then it becomes your own motivation and your own standard. But you deliver on that. And if it ends up taking longer and your hourly rate drops in your internal calculation, then that's just how it is. But if you earn it and the results are good, then you'll also have a project where you achieve the result and maybe don't need as much time. Maybe fourth, a few practical approaches. For a strong positioning, now a bit condensed, since I've already touched on a lot, first and foremost, a clear focus on customer benefit. What problem am I solving? For example, better team dynamics, targeted leadership development, or avoiding hiring mistakes. Then, of course, gather proof of this, show successes with clear numbers and case studies. I'm not yet at the point where I want to be myself. That's a focus for this year. Also, bringing together testimonials accordingly. Then, increase effectiveness and efficiency. That's what the client wants to see as well, that you have tools like potential analyses, feedback systems, and use specific statistics to make your work measurable. So, through professionalization, you also continue to develop your skills through training and expertise, which you acquire yourself. And advertising is, of course, allowed at this point, in my opinion. Profiling Values offers exactly that. When you get certified with us, you become a true expert with a powerful tool. And that really makes a difference in your positioning. So, in the end, your positioning is what makes the difference. Strengthen your position by putting your tools and expertise in the spotlight, front and center. Be the first choice for clients who are looking for quality and clarity. You can always improve your own performance. And as long as the tools you use are good, they'll always help you move forward. So invest in yourself to be successful in the long run. Find your specific niche as a consultant and coach when it comes to positioning. Make it focused. Don't try to do everything and then find the right tools for it. Develop your expertise there. And then you'll be even more successful. Thanks for sticking around until the end of the episode. I'm already looking forward to the next topics. It's going to be an exciting year. I wish you lots and lots of success with your positioning in the market. Bye for now.